The Ministry of the Prophet Muhammad through the Quran. Chapter 3. Who is your God, O Muhammad? In compliance with the previous series of revelations, the Prophet continued reminding his people as instructed by the Lord. However, the more he warned them, the more frustrated with him they became. It truly baffled him why his own people were reacting so inconsistently with him in comparison to their treatment of him prior to him receiving the message. For he had been a well-liked and well-respected member of the community, one who was adored, trusted, and admired by all those whom he met. However, when he had come to them with the warnings of their Lord, they immediately evaded him and treated him like a shunned leper. They encouraged everyone in the city to steer clear of him, and whenever the Prophet sought to approach one of them, those in power would immediately intervene, threatening violence against those who had adopted his message, refusing to talk to them or trade with them in their businesses. Whenever they saw him walking about in the streets and the marketplaces, they would recoil at his advances and would hurl insults at him, and they would repudiate those who even contemplated the idea of approaching him for anything. They instead preferred enslaving themselves to their false deities, whose statues and visages they had displayed in the vicinities of the ancient house. As they were the custodians of the sacred shrine, they feared that if the Prophet had been successful in his mission, they would be removed from their positions of power and prestige. They had been in charge of the yearly pilgrimages to the house, and so, they greatly feared that their wealth and reputation would be tremendously undercut if the Prophet were to be successful. So they did everything they could to undermine his mission, even going as far as trying to kill him. Not only that, but they had also polluted the sacred shrine with idols and pagan practices, which the Lord had not granted them any authority. During the yearly pilgrimages, they would adorn the shrine with several deities from all the surrounding regions in order to attract people to the shrine for profit, though knowing fully well that there is no God, but the one true God. They took what belongs to God and delegated it to man, and they turned the house of the Lord into a den of thieves and robbers. Thus they adopted all sorts of practices into the divine order, practices concerning which the Lord had not sent down any authority unto them, and they committed all sorts of lewd, immoral, and shameful acts, attributing them to the Lord and unto their fathers. So, when the Prophet called them out for their wrongdoing and unfair treatment of the meek, they became furious with him, as they felt that he was undermining their economy as well as their prospects. So, they thus resorted to making a mockery of him, ridiculing him, so as to discredit anything that he had to say. They likewise questioned him and challenged him, insisting him to give them a physical description of his God. For the gods whom they served had been personified with the usage of idols and statues. For it had been a need of man since the beginning of time to personify the divine. And so, it seemed so bizarre to them why the Prophet had not aligned with their traditions in this understanding. So, in light of their objections and inquiries about God's nature, it became imperative for the Lord to respond in his own words regarding his character, saying, "Say, He is Allah, the uniquely indivisible and irreducible, the indestructible source of refuge and dependence. He does not beget, nor was he begotten, and there cannot be anyone as an equal to him." Short and simple were the resounding words of the Lord, but how sweet and concise, for therein the Lord had declared his nature in no uncertain terms, namely, that the Lord is that which is indivisibly unique, that which cannot be irreducibly divided or separated into parts, the indestructible source of dependence for everything, the grand unifying force, stable and unchangeable, without which nothing can come into existence. Similarly, that the Lord is not a biological organism, since biological organisms reproduce either through sexual or asexual reproduction, and that nothing can be equaled, equated, or comparable to him. And since the Lord is the enduring source of dependence for everything, it behooved the Lord to grant protection to his prophet against certain evils of the world. For the prophet had now entered a new course in his ministry, and this new course was poised to yield a bloody clash with his interlocutors. So, when the prophet was in dire need of refuge, the Lord was quick to respond in yet another revelation, an appellation by which those who desired God could seek refuge by his side. Therein, the Lord would go on to caution his servant to tread carefully in his dealings with certain people, as some of them might have held a grudge against him and his endeavors. The Lord declared therein, saying, "Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of the cleaving, from the evil of what he created, and from the evil of the darkness when it sets in, and from the evil of the blowers into the knots, and from the evil of an envier when he envies." In this revelation, the Lord encouraged the prophet to seek his protection from some of the evils of the world, of which included evils that accompany the darkness of the night, as well as those which result from all forms of envious behavior, as the Lord's refuge is that which should be sought against all evils. For the Lord is the one who brings forth new substances by cleaving them from other substances. Such is the mechanism of creation, and as such, the prophet was to realize that there was none other to seek protection from other than the Lord Almighty, as the Lord is the master of cleaving, and as such, he is capable of cleaving the evil of that which he created from harming those whom he created. Since the Lord is the one who created man from a clinging substance, he is in no way clueless to the evils of man, be they physical or mental. The Lord certainly does know that the world which he created is a breeding ground for many evils, evils outside the control of man, as well as those which occur at the hands of man. For evil does not exist in exclusivity. Rather, it is a byproduct of what the Lord had created, and is only considered as such to the eyes of those who can perceive, contemplate, and understand it. In addition, the prophet is likewise encouraged to seek refuge from the evils that result due to the darkening of the night. For nighttime functions as a covering for man, whereby he betakes his actions hidden from the world. Hence, he is more prone to committing the vilest and evilest of evils, as he does not think anybody is watching him. Similarly, nighttime provides sanctuary for those who conspire against others, particularly those who spend their nights wishing and plotting the downfall of others. For since the prophet's reputation had grown since the commencement of the revelation, those who were in power saw him as a threat, and as such, they would spend their nights conspiring against him, imploring all sorts of vile means to undermine his campaign. Some of them even went as far as trying to summon so-called dark forces to harm him, whereas others attempted spell-casting, enchantments, divinations, and all kinds of acts that involved the blowing into knots, the burning and binding of poppets, and the mixing of potions and poisons, all done to induce some misfortune on the prophet. However, none of their attempts were ever bound to come to fruition, as the prophet knew never to lend his attention to such insanity. Only those who believed in such fallacies ever fell victim to such tactics and practices, for it is not the witchcraft of its practitioners that bring about harm. Rather, it is the practitioners themselves who carry out the harm and then accredit it to their gods, thus profiting at the gullibility of man. Similarly, it is likewise for those who envy others, for envy on its own has no effect, but it is the evil actions that result from the envy of the individual. And as such, the Lord encourages his servant to ought be on his guard against such a person when he envies, as envy on its own only consumes the one who carries envy within their heart. In light of the previous revelation, the Lord likewise saw it fit to reinforce his messenger with yet another revelation, a revelation which echoed somewhat the same sentiment as the former revelation. For therein, the Lord makes his true position known to all those who were listening, as he declares, saying, "Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the whispers of the stealthy, sneaking individual who whispers into the chests of the people from among the jinn and mankind." Such was the impeccable resolve of the Lord, for the Lord intended to make it clear to all those who served other deities that there truly is no other God other than him, for he is the Lord, King, and God of all mankind, and as such, there can be no other God other than the Lord Almighty. For in similar fashion, the Lord addressed his prophet to respond to all those who had inquired about who he is and what position he holds among their so-called pantheons. The Lord had declared in no uncertain terms that there can be no other deity other than him. For even those who invoked others alongside him recognized that there truly is just the one God, and there can be no Savior other than him. With that in mind, the Lord encouraged the prophet, and in extension the listener to the revelation, to seek his refuge from the evils that result from the whisperings of the one who stealthily sneaks up and retreats, particularly those individuals who whisper all sorts of impure thoughts into the hearts and minds of people, seeking to cause dissension and animosity. These whispers usually creep up to man in the form of gossip, conspiracy, rumors, misinformation, and so on. And they typically serve the purpose of creating chaos, mistrust, disorder, and toxicity amongst people. Furthermore, such sorts of whispers have the ability to destroy one's self-esteem as well as self-confidence, and can, in certain cases, lead to detrimental psychological ailments. Thus, it was imperative for the Lord to equip his prophet with the necessary tools to counter the evil effects that might result from these whispers. For the prophet had been exposed to the vilest of such attacks, and therefore, knowing how to protect and shield himself from the evil consequences of these attacks was paramount to him succeeding as a prophet. His life had practically been turned upside down and exposed for all to examine, probe, and scrutinize, and it was clearly bound to garner some criticism from certain groups of people. For nobody likes lies being told about them, or their life critiqued, or their reputation questioned, and the prophet was similarly not to be spared from this. He was a human being after all, and as such, he was deeply affected by the same emotions just like any other man, to a point that it would cause him great discomfort and distress. Hence, the Lord equipped him with certain phrases that he would utter to keep his mind alert to the ineffectiveness of these whispers about him. Herein, he was instructed to not let himself be too affected by the rumors and gossip about him, for these rumors could only affect him if he were to let them, or if he were to be inclined towards them. Now, as the revelations became more and more frequent, the prophet could not help but worry whether he would be able to maintain all the revelations that had been revealed to him by the Lord. So to ease his worry, the Lord called out to him, saying, "Declare the glory of the name of thy Lord, the Most High, the one who created and proportioned, and the one who measured out and then guided, the one who brought forth the grazing fodder, and then he turned it into a dark black waste. We shall surely recite to thee, O Muhammad, so that thou does not forget, with the exception of what Allah has willed, as he truly does know the hidden and whatever is apparent, and we shall facilitate thee towards the easy. So remind thou, as the reminder is indeed beneficial. The one who is concerned will take heed, whereas the one who is unfortunate will be deprived. The one who will be exposed to the great fire, and then he will neither die therein, nor will he be living. Successful, in fact, shall be the one who purified, and he remembered the name of his Lord, and so he communed. But yet you prefer the life of the world, whereas the afterlife is better and longer lasting. This truly is in the former scrolls indeed, the scrolls of Abraham and Moses. Such were the heartening words of the Lord, for therein the Lord reassured his servant that nothing of that which had been recited unto him by the permission of his Lord would ever be forgotten, as the Lord is the one who knows the hidden matters of everything, as well as the apparent. As such, the prophet was to declare the glory of the name of the Most High God, who created and assigned everything its due proportion, shape, and form. The Lord is the one who firmly plants the seed into the ground, and when it takes root, its roots absorb the water and nutrients from the soil and then transport them to the shoots and leaves. Then the Lord brings it forth as green fodder, which serves as nourishment for the grazing animals and many people. Then, when the Lord determines, it loses its nutrients and becomes dry, thus turning into stubble. Not only would the prophet never forget the revelations, but the Lord also informed him that he would likewise provide him with the facilities towards the easiest approach to his ministry. For the Lord had likewise sworn in a previous revelation that with hardship there would follow ease. And so, just as that is a true facet of life, then so shall the Lord direct his servant towards the ease. The prophet was therefore to continue admonishing his people and lead them to guidance, as the reminder would in the end only be beneficial to the ones who wanted to be admonished. If the prophet felt that certain people might not have been interested in his teachings, then he needed not worry, as there would be many others who would be willing to listen, particularly those who were deeply concerned about their Lord. They would take heed, declares the Lord, whereas the unfortunate ones would be deprived from ever attaining the favor of God, as they had chosen to defy the Holy One and shun his guidance, and as such, they will be exposed to the great fire of doom, wherein they will exist in a horrid state of being, neither experiencing death nor life. However, as for those who purify themselves through the revelation of the Lord, they would be the successful ones in the sight of God, as they commemorated the name of their Lord and established communion with God. Despite this, declares the Lord, the majority of people do not pay heed to the admonition, instead preferring the fleeting life of the world, even when the afterlife is better and more enduring. But had they only known, they would have realized that the pursuit of lusts and desires would not bring about their success. For success would only be acquired through the purification of the human self. This had not been a new concept introduced in the Quran, declares the Lord. Rather, it had been an understood concept from the ancient revelations and traditions, here in particular the scrolls of Abraham and Moses.